In 1925, one man convinced 5 wealthy businessmen that the Eiffel Tower was being sold for scrap metal, and one of them handed over enough money to actually buy it. How do you convince grown, successful businessmen that one of the most famous buildings on Earth is theirs to purchase? And when the plan worked once, why would he decide to try the exact same trick again? This is the true story of Victor Lustig, a man law enforcement across 2 continents considered one of the most dangerous con artists alive, and the only person in history who can honestly claim he sold the Eiffel Tower. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how the con worked, step by step, and you'll pick up 3 advanced English words native speakers use all the time that you won't find in a textbook. To understand how Lustig pulled off something this bold, you have to understand who he already was by 1925. He was born in 1890 in a small town that's now part of the Czech Republic, and by his 20s, he spoke 5 languages fluently. Instead of using that intelligence for anything ordinary, he used it to become one of the most skilled con artists Europe had ever produced. His first cons happened on ocean liners crossing the Atlantic between France and New York. He would pose as a Broadway producer looking for investors in an upcoming musical, a show that never existed. And wealthy passengers, flattered to be asked, handed over their money before the ship even docked. When the First World War brought ocean travel to a halt, Lustig adapted. He built a wooden box he called the money printing machine. He'd load a real $100 bill into one side, turn a crank, and, after a slow, suspenseful few minutes, a second $100 bill would slide out the other side. It was a trick, of course. The box was preloaded with counterfeit bills. But he let a buyer test it 2 or 3 times with real cash first, so by the time he sold the box itself for $10,000 or more, the buyer was completely convinced. Then Lustig would vanish, and the buyer would be left turning a crank that only ever produced blank paper. By 1925, he had already escaped arrest more than 40 times. He was, in every sense, exactly the kind of man who would look at the most famous landmark in Europe and see not a monument, but an opportunity. By 1925, the Eiffel Tower was 36 years old, and Paris didn't love it anymore. It had been built as a temporary structure for a World's Fair back in 1889, and decades later it was rusting, expensive to maintain, and unpopular with a public that had never really wanted it in the first place. Newspapers openly speculated that the city might tear it down. Victor Lustig read one of those articles in his hotel room and saw an opportunity nobody else in Paris would have thought to look for. He had spent years perfecting an audacious kind of confidence trick con artists called the big store. Build an entire fake world around your target, so convincing they never think to question it. This time, the fake world would be the French government itself. Using forged stationery bearing an official government seal, Lustig checked into the Hôtel de Crillon, one of the most respected addresses in Paris, and presented himself as a senior official from the Ministry of Posts and Telegraphs. He wrote to 6 of the city's top scrap metal dealers, inviting each of them to a private, confidential meeting. No competitors, no paperwork trail, just him, alone with them, in a hotel suite paid for with borrowed authority. He had exactly 1 meeting to convince strangers to hand him a fortune for something that was never his to sell. In the room, Lustig told them a quiet, believable story. The tower's upkeep had become an embarrassment for the government. Repairs were too costly to justify publicly, and officials had decided, discreetly, to sell it for scrap rather than announce a demolition and face public backlash. He needed a buyer who could be trusted to handle it without making a scandal of it. Every detail supported the illusion. The forged documents, the official seal, the 5-language charm he'd spent a lifetime cultivating. His performance gave the entire scheme credibility. The one thing every con depends on completely. One dealer in the room, André Poisson, was ambitious, eager to prove himself among Paris's business elite. Lustig noticed it immediately and used it. When Poisson seemed hesitant, Lustig quietly suggested a bribe was expected, as officials in his position often required one. Poisson didn't hesitate again, because agreeing to bribe an official feels like proof you're finally being let into a secret deal, when in fact, it's the opposite. It's the final piece that makes the whole story feel real. Poisson paid the full amount in cash. Lustig collected the money and, within a day, was already gone, not just from the hotel, but from Paris entirely. He'd picked exactly the right man and vanished with the money before anyone thought to ask a single question. Here's the part of the story that sounds invented, but isn't. Weeks later, when no scandal broke and no police report appeared because Poisson was too embarrassed to admit he'd been fooled, Lustig went back to Paris and ran the entire con a second time. New scrap dealers, same forged letters, same hotel, same performance. By now, this wasn't just audacious. It was almost impossible to believe anyone would risk it. But it nearly worked again. This time, one of the dealers grew suspicious, did some quiet checking of his own, and went straight to the police. Lustig had minutes, not days, to disappear from Paris completely. He escaped just ahead of the investigation without a single franc from the second sale. Selling a landmark twice would be enough for most criminals to retire on. Lustig wasn't most criminals. A few years later, now in the United States, he did something that sounds like a death wish. He walked into a meeting with Al Capone, at the time one of the most feared men in America, and asked him to invest $50,000 in a business scheme. Capone was suspicious. He agreed anyway, but made it clear what would happen if Lustig was lying to him. Lustig took the money, locked it in a safe, and did nothing. He waited 2 months. Then he returned to Capone, explained with real disappointment that the deal had fallen through, and handed back the entire $50,000 untouched. Capone hadn't expected honesty from a stranger asking him for money. He was so impressed that when Lustig, almost as an afterthought, mentioned he was a little short on cash himself, Capone handed him $5,000 as a reward. That $5,000 had been the actual goal from the very beginning. Lustig never intended to invest a cent of Capone's money. He only needed Capone to trust him enough to give some of it back voluntarily. It's considered one of the most notorious short cons in criminal history, precisely because nothing about it looked like a con at all. Lustig's luck ran out in the 1930s. He partnered with a chemist to run a large counterfeiting operation, flooding the country with more than $2 million in fake bills. Federal agents eventually tracked him down in New York in 1935. Even then, he wasn't finished. He tied bed sheets together and climbed out of a third-story window to escape custody, staying free for almost a month before agents finally caught up with him in Pittsburgh. This time, there was no talking his way out. He was sentenced to 20 years at Alcatraz, the same prison that held Al Capone, the very man he'd once talked out of $50,000. He died in a federal prison hospital in 1947. By most accounts, his death certificate listed his occupation simply as apprentice salesman. Even at the very end, the truth was still one more thing Victor Lustig had managed to disguise. Let's lock in today's 3 words. Audacious. So bold and daring it seems almost shocking. You could say, quitting his job to sail around the world alone was an audacious decision. Credibility. How believable or trustworthy someone or something seems. She lost all credibility after they found out she'd lied on her resume. And notorious. Well known, but for something bad. The neighborhood was notorious for its traffic jams. Try using one of these 3 in the comments. I'll be reading them. If you understood most of that without needing the subtitles, you're already listening at an advanced level. Subscribe. Next episode is even stranger than this one.